Hello and welcome to another edition of Knickerbocker Banter. I'm your host, as always, Harris Wishard. Today with me, another special guest, ESPN radio host, dear friend of mine, Freddie Coleman. Welcome to the program.
What's up, brother Harris? How's everything with you, my man?
Everything is great, man. I'm a very happy Knicks fan right now. I'm looking forward to an intense series. But I want to let the fans of this show know about you is obviously you had, your career in the Poughkeepsie area before you went to ESPN. I reached out to you in college when I was at New Paltz, and it just couldn't have been nicer, right? You gave me the time of day when I had the college show there on 88.7. I'll never forget that, but you're just as humble as they come, and no one would ever know that you've had the success that you've had. So you know how much I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, and I tell people all the time that if you have a chance to be blessed beyond words, you never feel as if you're working. You never feel as if it's doing something that's a chore. So I know exactly how fortunate I've been able to have been a part of ESPN Radio close to 20 years now, but just being in our field, I know exactly how blessed I am to have so many different experiences and encounter so many great people like yourself that has really made my career more than worth it than I could have ever imagined when I graduated from school many years ago.
You're still looking great though, man. Really are. And I listen to your show. I love your passion, your energy, but we talk about your love with basketball and in New York and what the Knicks have meant to you and what the sport has. I know you covered for Maris before you got to ESPN. So can you tell the fans a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the best things about growing up first being born in Brooklyn, New York, and then moving to Queens when I was a teenager is that basketball is definitely the city game, that if you got a basketball, you're always going to have company, especially when people want to play and have that kind of passion and the back and forth and the good nature trash talking and the bad nature trash talking. But I always was a basketball fan, just watching and loving the game. And when you grow up in New York, you get all those worlds. And when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, where you had the New York Knicks and when you had that fives of Walt Frazier, Willis Reed, and Bill Bradley, along with Dave DeBusschere, and first it was Dick Barnett, then Earl the Pearl Monroe, and they traded him from the Knicks from the Baltimore Bullets. But then the ABA was happening in the 70s. You had Dr. J and those New York Nets teams. So having a chance to be around that as a kid growing up, and then having college basketball where you had St. John's, where you also had Syracuse, and you had the beginnings of the Big East in the late 70s. So you could not have picked a better time as a kid like me when you're growing up and you have pro basketball, the New York Knicks, and then the ABA coming along. And there was so many great college basketball success stories in that tri-state era growing up in the late 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, no question. And just the city seems to be, as I've talked about a lot on this show, returning to that passion and that heart that, we saw in the 90s. That was my time becoming a New York Knicks fan.
Yep.
What has impressed you about this group, and why do you think Knicks fans should have a reason for optimism and hope going forward?
Well, you look at this basketball team, and you never have to question where their heart or their buy-in is going to be. And it could have been very easy for this team to make excuses when they didn't have Julius Randle, and then they lost him for the rest of the regular season. Then OG Anunoby had his injury situations when they acquired him from the Toronto Raptors. But Tom Thibodeau had let it be known that's not who we are. It's going to be a next man up philosophy. And we've seen Dante DiVincenzo be the kind of guy that you wonder if you were going to see that pairing up with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart again, but he's expanded his game. Miles McBride has been terrific with his basketball team. Isaiah Hartenstein, or as he likes to call himself, bright skin, doing that when Mitchell Robinson got injured, then Mitchell Robinson coming back and playing effectively well. They've never looked at each other and say, woe is us, or we hope to keep it close. They're like, look, this is the game we're going to play. This is the way we're going to get after it. And when you have your best player as your best leader and the guy that works the hardest when it comes to Jalen Brunson, it can be very easy to have that kind of buy-in because you know exactly what you've gotten into when you play with a guy like that and you play for a coach like that at Tom Thibodeau.
Absolutely. And as a proud Knicks fan on Sunday, because I know you saw what was going on in Cleveland, and it comes to no surprise with a Tibbs-led group that the Knicks were not going to pull their starters out and not win this basketball game, to be, as a lot of the players have now called it, ducking smoke.
Right.
And we saw that in Cleveland now. A lot of speculation. We can't be certain, but it looks like they didn't want any part of the potential Philadelphia Heat winner, as the Knicks didn't care. And that comes as no surprise. I'm sure you growing up in New York and being the passionate fan you are, you had no problem with the Knicks going ahead to win this basketball game on Sunday.
Oh, there's no doubt about it because it's really, really special in 50 games in a regular season in the NBA, especially when the East is more loaded than we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, where it used to be if you won 50 games, you were not only the second seed, you were a runaway second seed, or you were a lot closer to the top seed. You had Boston winning 64 games this year. There were so many teams that won between 45 and 48 games that if you have a chance to try to have as much of a home court advantage as you possibly can in the playoffs, to have that possibility being there, you had to go for that when it comes to the New York Knicks. And Tom Thibodeau also understands the bigger space because you go for it, and if you win or lose, you don't play again for another 6 days. You have a chance for your team to recharge their bodies and recharge their minds. So why not stay true to what has been an MO, what has been your calling card when it comes to the New York Knicks? No matter what, we're going to play that game. We're going to play until the final whistle. We're going to go hard until the final whistle. So I would have been really, really disappointed had the Knicks backed away and sat their starters and say, well, in the playoffs, we want to make sure everybody's fully rested. Tom Thibodeau's like, look, basketball players play. We rest these guys enough during practice sessions and we go hard during the games. And we're going to have 6 days before we have to worry about game 1 of the NBA playoffs. So why not go for something and have that kind of goal, and you reach that kind of goal and you take that momentum when the playoffs get started on Saturday at 6 o'clock Eastern time against the Philadelphia 76ers.
No question. You know what? As a Cavs fan, I think I would be sick to my stomach because I think I would go in without the necessary confidence that you would need as an organization. And I think that's why, regardless if the Knicks make a deep run this year, that you feel good about what's going on right now from a culture standpoint. I'm not going to argue that the Pacers might not be a tougher team than the Heat or 76ers, but what I will argue is saying that you don't want to play, saying that you want to change the way you're going to go about it, to me, that sends not only the wrong message, but I certainly wouldn't feel good about what we're trying to build. So listen, it's a human thought that comes up as the match. But I listen, I told everybody that asked me about that is bring on whoever you have to bring on, line them up. We had Childs the other day, and you know how he played, right? You know how that 90s team played. They didn't care about anything. They just wanted to compete. So I think it's just a breath of fresh air, no?
Yeah, no doubt about that. And you look at it from the Cleveland Cavaliers standpoint, I know, Harris, that if I'm the Orlando Magic, I'm taking that personally because basically you told everybody that's a better matchup for us. You don't say it's a better matchup for us in a series. You're saying it's a better matchup for us to win those basketball games and to win that series. And I know if I'm Paolo Banchero, if I'm the Wagner brothers, if I'm Jamal Mosley, head coach of Orlando, that is on my bulletin board. That's in my phone that when I wake up each and every day, I'm saying, hey, Cleveland wanted to play you because they don't believe that you can beat them in the series. And this Orlando Magic team is not only young, but pretty frisky and also pretty talented. So any kind of motivation you're going to give a team like that, you have to be careful it doesn't come back to haunt you because you're right about the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have the kind of personnel that can make that deep run in the playoffs. When you have a Donovan Mitchell, when you have a Darius Garland, when you got Jarrett Allen and Mobley on your front line, and also Cass LeVert coming off the bench, you have talented guys that can go get those buckets you're going to need in the playoffs. But now you're giving a team additional motivation. And I still wonder about the Cleveland Cavaliers and sort of their psyche because I know they're tough physically, but I just wonder how mentally tough they are because I thought that was a calling card that the Knicks used against them last year by beating them in that first round series, even though Cleveland Cavaliers had the home court advantage.
Well, you talked about bulletin board material, and I was fired up already because I'll be in the building on Saturday, and I can't wait to scream. My voice will be gone in the middle of the second quarter, but, it's just the Paul Reed thing I saw. He was talking about, this just came out about an hour ago. I just saw it. I think he was talking to Chandler Parsons, and he said, yeah, winning the play-in last night, now, we get the easier team. He said, and if I'm the Knicks, I'm putting that on repeat, the easier team. I don't think they need any motivation with this group. And then I read the Jalen Brunson Players Tribune article he just wrote. Now I just want to run through a wall, and I'm saying I have to wait 2 days. But can you just speak on Brunson and just the way he's just shattered this ceiling of that people have put on him? And I don't know if anybody expected this, maybe other than him and his father, but what he's meant to the city and how impressive his play has been.
Well, nobody expected this. I think if you even ask Jalen Brunson, if you told him year 2 of his contract, he would be averaging close to 29 points a game. There's no way that he would have said that was possible because he said, hey, that means I'm taking shots away from Julius Randle. But his ability to make plays, especially off 2 feet, especially against height, that's the one thing that has really enhanced and elevated his game because last year height really bothered Jalen Brunson. And I go back to that game against the Boston Celtics before the holidays, where in the fourth quarter they put Jason Tatum and Jamal and also Jaylen Brown on him, and he had a very tough time getting his shot. He really worked on that, and Tom Thibodeau did a great job of putting him in positions where that height was not going to bother him, to give him more space to create those kind of shots and make it an easier shot. But even all those Knicks fans out there, and I'll never forget, I don't know who put it out there on social media saying they're going to keep these receipts. I was like, stop it. You didn't know that Jalen Brunson was going to look like this. And there were plenty of people that said, and I'll raise my hand, I was one, I said, boy, that's a lot of money in a contract, even over 4 years, to say that you're going to be a franchise player, because we hadn't seen that. We didn't know if he could be able to pull that off. And I was hoping that he's going to be better than anybody had anything to say about Jalen Brunson. I was not rooting for him to have a lack of success. But when people start to say we kept receipts, stop it, because you need to put yourself in that box as well, because you were saying the same thing, that, man, that's a lot of money paid for a guy that we still don't know. Now we got an idea that he can not only be a team leader and a bucket getter, but raising everybody else's level, which is something he did in spurts in Dallas that we really seen in a full tilt boogie in his first 2 years in New York with the New York Knicks.
No question. And the difference between that is you're on the radio, you're on TV making these takes, and a lot of people could say it to their friends and no one ever hears it again. So I, hold to you for, credit to you for owning that. But I didn't even look at it like that. I looked at it as, my point about Brunson was always, I thought he could maybe be an all-star. I thought maybe that ceiling. And then it got to the point where I said, you know what, maybe no one should really come out and say anything bad about, like, and we talked about some of the show on the program, all year. Becky Hammon's comments, Kenny Smith's comment. Some people are going to come out and say something that's just not true, or could be proven wrong over time.
Right.
Becky Hammon with, toes too small and not a 1A, and seemingly, what he's done now has proven that he is that guy. But let's talk about this series for a second, right? Joel Embiid is, to me, the big guy in the middle that the Knicks have to worry about, right? And his health is going to be a factor. People don't realize he hasn't been to a conference final in his career yet at 30 years old. So what take a Philadelphia 76ers side of it as a fan of that organization, why should they have confidence that this can be different?
Well, because they don't have James Harden in their basketball team. That's number one. Because nothing against James Harden, as great as he's been, he has never delivered when they really needed him. I don't care if he's with the Clippers or the Houston Rockets or even the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, come on, you're up 3-2 with Game 6 in your building. Jason Tatum goes 0 for the first 3 quarters, and you couldn't put that team away, and then you don't show up in Game 7. And I thought Tim Legler, who knows Philly basketball pretty well, as an ESPN NBA analyst, he says when you're James Harden, your floor shouldn't be 6 points, 6 assists, and 5 turnovers in an elimination game. That should be somebody else's floor. That shouldn't be your floor. So that's number one, because they don't have that now in Philadelphia. Tyrese Maxey is a guy that can play at both ends of the floor. Joel Embiid has showed exactly what kind of leader he is. You don't expect Nicholas Batum to do what he did in that playing game versus Scott. Well, absolutely. Well, if he does, you hope that he got that out of the way in the playing game.
For sure.
That's about a sack rate blue that you don't want to deal with if you're the New York Knicks, if Nicholas Batum is doing something like that. But having a Joel Embiid, I think Tyrese Maxey gives him that confidence that, hey, even if he's not playing well, he's still going to make plays. He's not going to check out on us. Joel Embiid did not play well against the Miami Heat, but he never checked out. And then he made 2 huge threes in the fourth quarter. He made that great pass to find Batum for that 3-pointer on the left side. And then Kelly Oubre Jr. gets the duck in. He finds a pass on the money, looking like Jalen Hurst on the pass to A.J. Brown for the Philadelphia Eagles to get that bucket.
I'm a Giant fan too. Killing me.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what Joel Embiid has always been about. I just wonder about his health in terms of coming back that soon from an injury, and now you're about to play grueling basketball at a 25th power. That's why I think Tyrese Maxey is really, really key for the Philadelphia 76ers. And Harris, for my money, he may have to wind up being the best player for the Philadelphia 76ers, because that Joel Embiid is going to have an impact, but it's not going to be as much of an impact because he's still trying to come back from an injury and playing in high-level basketball in a high-level situation against a team that has home court advantage when it comes to the New York Knicks.
Absolutely. I agree with you, because I've said this all year. The Knicks around the basket don't worry me defensively. You have a mix of Hartenstein and Robinson.
Yep.
And Obi could be physical down there. They rotate really well. But when you have a dynamic player on the perimeter, like Maxey, or who starts on him, right? Is it DiVincenzo? And Obi is going to get an opportunity at some point, right? Because when that he could guard multiple players and multiple positions, what makes him very dynamic. But Maxey's going to get in the paint. I want to get Embiid away from the rim. Like his knee yesterday, or He was, limping around a little bit. It looked like he wasn't 100%. If he wants threes, be my guest in this series. If he wants to come on the perimeter and kind of get in the space of Maxey a little bit. If Maxey has some open room, like you talked about, that could be concerning for the Knicks. And they're going to have to throw multiple bodies at him because he, like you said, can go off at any time.
You got to make it hard on Maxey that when he gets into the lane that he doesn't get to the front of the rim. You got to force him to make pull-ups in the lane because he has struggled a little bit with that. He can do what's been the hot move in basketball. You drive hard into a defender, and then you hit that fadeaway in the lane where you start 3 feet from the basket, then you get that shot about 6 or 7 feet. He's really good at that. But you can't allow him to get that deep and have those paint touches where all of a sudden he can hit that step back or hit that fadeaway in the lane. You got to make him use the pull-up and make him use those runners because he struggles with that. And if he's not able to make that kind of shot, then you can get out in the break because now that player is deeper into the paint, which means he's not back on defense. If they don't rotate quickly back on defense with a compromised Joel Embiid, then you can create easy shots in transition where you can have Jalen Brunson get to the rim. You can have Dante DiVincenzo and Miles McBride with those snipers on the outside getting that space to knock down those three-point shots. That's why you have to control Tyrese Maxey. If we see a lot of paint touches from him, let's say if he goes for 30 points, but about 20 of those points are in the paint or at the free throw line, that's going to be a problem for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We know Jalen Brunson to shift to the Knicks offense is going to get a lot of attention. There is no way around that at this point. We know what's going to happen on some ball screens and some blitzing, and that's why the Hartenstein, having some confidence passing the basketball around the foul line area and the floaters. But when I think of who's going to need to make shots, I kind of expect DiVincenzo to be there and make his plays. But I'm thinking of guys like McBride and Bogdanovich. If these guys could spread the floor and make it just a little bit easier on Brunson, like if those guys have 0 for 7, 1 for 7 games, the Knicks could be in some trouble in my estimation. I think those guys need to have an impact. I know Bogdanovich is dealing with the wrist, but those guys play and have some good games in there. I think I've made the prediction that Bogdanovich is going to win them a game in the fourth quarter in this series. You feel the same way about the role guys on the Knicks?
Yeah, because the Brunson Nets have to step up. We know they're the background singers to Jalen Brunson being the lead singer, but you mentioned Bogdanovich, and he has shot the ball a lot better for the New York Knicks. I think he's found that comfort level where he can get the ball in the spaces he needs, and he can come up those screens really tight as well. And he's also shown the ability that he can get into the lane and make those kind of shots. So his value has started to increase a little bit more because he's making shots, and now he's not a liability on the defensive end. The one thing that the Knicks have really had in their favor due to the Julius Randle injury is that the collective has been a lot better than people could have anticipated. And that's why when you have an OG Anunoby, he can make shots where he can make that corner three. He can get into the lane and be a bull in the china shop. So his value is not just on one end, being a great plus-minus guy in the plus side when it comes to the New York Knicks. But we've seen so many guys, and this is where the credit has to go to Tom Thibodeau and his staff, because we know Tom Thibodeau is a defensive guy. That's how he made his name. That's how he made his game. But he is as good at putting people in great situations offensively to get better shots for his basketball team. He's used to doing that because he did that at the Chicago Bulls with Derrick Rose. He knows how to make that work with smaller guards and have that be a really, really effective way. So he's had to maybe have that work in his favor, having a Jalen Brunson, having a Miles McBride, where all of a sudden now it's not just about how can you combat him. Tom Thibodeau has shown that he can use Jalen Brunson in ways that gets other guys better shots, not just getting Jalen Brunson better shots, because he did that to the success of the Chicago Bulls. People forget they had the best record in the Eastern Conference. They just ran to a Miami Heat team where the length got the best of them, and they had the best record in the Eastern Conference again before Derrick Rose tore his ACL in that playoff series against the Philadelphia 76ers. So his offensive capability and his creativity has really been a boon to so many different people, not named Jalen Brunson for the New York Knicks.
We touched on a lot of great things there, but we mentioned Tibbs, and the aura around the fan base was the criticism, I should say, is more about the minutes, and he can't bring out the best offensively in people, and all he's done to me is get better.
Yeah.
And all he's done to me, you hear about the film sessions, you hear about his dedication to the game, and I don't know how you feel about players having podcasts, but when I tune into the Roommate show and I listen to Brunson and Hart talk about him, I'd much rather listen. I know they're probably not going to bash their coach in public, but when I hear the genuine things that these guys are saying about him and the impact that he's made in New York, I want him here long term. I think he's turned the culture around. He was the start of it. Give Randall credit for being here as well. And then Brunson took it and ran with it. But the criticism of the minutes and all that stuff that gets blown out of proportion, can we focus also on some of the things that he's made better in New York.
Well, there's no doubt about that, Harris, because you mentioned the players, because Thibodeau, I think, finally has been able to have players to buy into him where it's not going to wreck his basketball team. And I wonder how much he learned this lesson, what happened with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I guarantee you that if he had his way, Jimmy Butler would have been the face of that franchise, because that's a Tibbs guy. Jimmy Butler doesn't complain about, okay, we need rest here, we got to do this. He's not worried about sensitivity training in terms of hurting people's feelings. He's like, either you're all in with us or you're not. And if you're not all in with us, well, then you're going to hear about it. I wonder how much Thibodeau learned from when that whole situation blew up and the organization chose Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins over him and Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler said, you're going to rue the day you made that decision. Well, the Minnesota Timberwolves have finally been able to get back to that situation 5-6 years later after they chose those guys over Tom Thibodeau and Jimmy Butler. So I think Tom Thibodeau said, the next time I get a head coaching job, I'm going to make sure that there's not going to be any kind of discussion or any kind of gray area about what you should expect from me and what I'm going to expect from you. That's why they went after Jalen Brunson and got him in free agency. It also helped that Rick Brunson was on the staff, but he's a Jalen Brunson guy. Tom Thibodeau's a Jalen Brunson guy as well. But you go get an OG Anunoby. You trade for Dante DiVincenzo. You keep a Mitchell Robinson. You bring in Isaiah Hartenstein. He has been able to fabric that kind of team because he knows that guys are going to battle with and for each other. He doesn't have to worry about division in the locker room if a guy is not going to be all in, have to hear about it, especially when Karl Anthony Towns was supposed to be the face of the franchise. So that's where I think a lot of credit has to go to Tom Thibodeau. Yeah, the defense is still going to be there. They're going to be the best defensive team in the playoffs, in my opinion, because they make you work for everything. But offensively, he's been really good with that creativity, but also making sure that I don't have to worry about, is that guy buying in or not buying in? There's no lick of that anywhere on this New York Knicks basketball team so far in 2023 and 2024.
No, man, like you said, it's going to be the defense chance that, to even start the game, we're going to feel like the fourth quarter. And I know the crowd is ready. Let's talk about a number. The last 3 playoff series for the New York Knicks, the winner of game 1 has gone on to win the series, right? And then the Hawks series, they lost game 1, they didn't win it. And they lost game 1 against the Heat, didn't win it. But then when they won game 1 on the road in the Cavs series, they won it. And so for me, holding serve at home court is so, and we know it's important, but they always say, the series doesn't start until someone loses on their home floor. But game 1, then especially game 2, holding serve at what will obviously be a home court advantage, but obviously we know how important it is for them to get off to the right start in this series and not give the momentum back to Philadelphia. By the way, not your typical 7 seed, has won 9 basketball games in a row.
Harris, I'm a big believer that confidence is dangerous when you have it and dangerous when you don't. And when you have home court advantage, that's the first sign of confidence until you lose a home game. And if you lose a game win at home, it feels like the air's been taken out of the building, because then it becomes an elimination game where you better win game 2 or the series is going to be over. Then you got to find a way. There's still a road game if you're able to do something like that. That's why it was so big last year that the Knicks won game 1 versus Cleveland in Cleveland, because a team that was really kind of teetering from a confidence standpoint really was teetering then, and they never recovered from that. The New York Knicks tried to recover from losing game 1, but once you do that to a Miami Heat team that they're just like sharks in the water, and they had the chum in the water when they took that game 1 from the New York Knicks. They're always pushing that boulder uphill. And if you're not able to steal a game on the road, then you're not going to win that series. So the last thing you want is a Philadelphia 76ers team that feels pretty confident as a 7th seed, especially Joel Embiid being back. They feel pretty confident they can get one of these 2 games in New York. If they're going to get a game 2, that's one thing. You can't afford to let them have a game 1 and really have that advantage flipped to them, because then now they have taken home court advantage away from you, and they put home court advantage right on their plate. And more than not, it's hard to overcome those things if that happens to you.
Yeah, and I said this, the physicality of this series, right? And we know New York, Philadelphia, there's no love lost there, right? You mentioned the Eagles before, and it made my blood boil, right? And then we talk about the Mets, Phillies, we know about that. So there's going to be no love lost there. I hope it doesn't get physical in the crowd and people aren't stupid about that. But it's just going to be one of those series. And something that's interesting also with the Nova guys returning to Philadelphia, right? And that connection with Kyle Lowry, right? The Wells Fargo Center, and he's just annoying. I hope he doesn't have the impact on the series that he had last year. But it's good. The Knicks got burned by role players versus Miami, and so I think if they can somehow contain, you don't stop the top 2 guys, you contain them. Guys like Lowry, it's going to be really important for them to slow him down, and just the connection that they have Hart, DiVincenzo, and Brunson. So there's familiarity there.
Yeah, it's not so much of slowing Kyle Lowry down. You just don't want him to get started, to be completely honest with you, because he's not a key player, but he is a presence that you really, really need. And Nick Nurse is used to that because they won a championship together when they bolted together the Toronto Raptors. So I don't think it's all about slowing him down. It's about slowing Tyrese Maxey down. It's about slowing Joel Embiid down, because those guys are going to have their say. You just can't let them have a big say in a playoff game or in a playoff series. But you can't allow a guy like Kyle Lowry or a guy like Tobias Harris to get started, because if anybody wants to have his confidence raised, it's definitely Tobias Harris, because when he took that three-point shot in the fourth quarter versus Miami, it was a collective groan in the Wells Fargo Center. And you know players feel that. But you don't want to allow those two guys, because it's not about slowing them down, because you don't want them to get started. They get started a little bit, then everybody else is going to feel better. We saw Nicholas Batum do that to the Miami Heat, a guy who came into that game barely averaging more than 5 points per game. Then he puts up a 20-burger and he makes 7 3-pointers for the Philadelphia 76ers. So, yeah, it's about slowing down the big guys, but the role players, you don't want them to get started, because more often than not in the series, once they get started, then it's really almost impossible to not just slow them down, but even stop them.
And it's even more deflating, right? It's like, all right, I tip my cap to Embiid. I tip my cap to Maxey. I was at the Garden last year watching Martin and, Strus, Strus, and all these guys light us up. And I'm like, is this how they've been playing all year? It was confusing to watch that happen. So, and Fred, we could go all day, right? We're both passionate Knicks fans. We can't wait for this series, but your non-biased outlook on this, I personally think the Knicks will be on the right side of that. Maybe that's, optimism and some slight bias, but I think it's a long series. I do. I don't think this is a short series. I think a lot of it does come down to the health of Joel Embiid, as much as that pains me to say it.
Yeah, and I think in terms of not just so much the physical health, but he looked gassed at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and he needed a break. And I wonder how much of that will be the theme and the tenor of this series. I'm with you. I think it's going to be a long series, but I think the Knicks win it in 6. I think they find a way to not lose home court advantage. I think they find a way to get a victory on the road in Game 6 and take care of the Philadelphia 76ers. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if the Knicks won in 5, because I think they're a better basketball team. And Nick Nurse is terrific as a head coach. He can dial up some things on that sideline for the Philadelphia 76ers. I just think the Knicks, the way their collective has been so much better than the collective of the Philadelphia 76ers outside of Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. I think that's going to be the difference in the series. I think the Knicks win it in 6, but it wouldn't surprise me if they won it in 5.
Wow. Well, listen, as I said to Chris the other day, from your mouth to God's ears, because I don't know if I could deal with a long series. I know this is going to stress us out. I was nervous in some of those late regular season games. It's a privilege, though. It's a privilege to be in this situation. You love it. You wouldn't trade it, because as Knicks fans know, and I've said it a lot on this program, we went through a lot. We did go through a lot, and there was a lot of struggle. So it's great that everyone in this city is excited. It's great that the weather is going to turn, right? And New York City will be alive. But Freddie Coleman, thank you so much for joining this show. And we'd have to check back in with you. Hopefully your prediction is right, and you come back at some point and give us some more of your time. But thank you so much, Freddie.
My pleasure, Harrison. Anytime you extend the invitation, my friend, I'm always going to do everything I can to make sure that as an invited guest, I want to be a part of this, my friend. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, everybody. Enjoy the games. We will talk to you soon. Saturday night, 6 p.m., Madison Square Garden, Knicks-Sixers, Game 1. Enjoy.